Sweet. Hi guys, how's it going? Thanks for coming to this session this morning. Really excited to talk to you guys about games and engagement in the classroom. So today's talk will be broken down into a couple different pieces. At first, we're going to kind of look at motivation overall and how it applies to games specifically, what makes games motivating. And then finally, we'll start looking a little bit at Classcraft and how we've taken some of these concepts and applied them to the platform. Maybe just a little quick overview on Classcraft. Classcraft is a way to gamify any classroom. So you don't change what you teach. It turns the interactions that happen naturally within the classroom into events in a game, and students progress by becoming better students. So really, it's kind of a motivation game that's also played in teams for the year. So with that in mind, I'm going to screen share, and we'll start looking at this presentation I prepared. Great. So using games to redefine the learning experience. So we know that the classroom right now is not the most compelling place. 87% or 86% of teachers cite classroom management as a top challenge faced by new teachers. 40% of students are chronically disengaged in school, and every year about 1.2 million students drop out of high school in the US. So that's about 7,000 students a day. So there's definitely an engagement problem. And the question that we ask ourselves at Classcraft is how can we redesign that experience of school? So if we think about how technology has affected a lot of different things that we interact with on a daily basis, you think of music. We listen to music on our phones, in our speakers or headphones. And we still go to concerts to have a collective social experience with that music. And so that same way that we can kind of learn things from the internet, what's the experience of being in a group in school look like, and how can that sort of evolve, because it's been pretty stagnant for a long, long time. So we understand that typically when we talk about motivation, it is external, right? So if we think about going to get a job, we go get a job to make money, or we go to school to get grades because we're afraid of getting bad grades and what that could mean in relationship to our parents and all that kind of stuff. And so typically educators know that creating and putting in place systems that are going to drive external motivation are they're a little easier to do, but typically over time they erode. So as someone gets older, maybe they care less about their grades, that kind of stuff. And so really kind of when we're talking about motivation, we're trying to do is figure out how to unlock internal motivation, right? So if you love something, then that's greater than having a carrot and stick approach. And so so there's a couple different factors in an educational context that really drive internal motivation. And so those are controllability, meaning, and competency. So controllability is like having autonomy over what you're doing. So if you're you're in an art class, you get to create something that you care about. So you'll be way more motivated to do that and invested in that project. Or if you, say, are teaching a math class and you're getting people to just do formulas, it's one level of engagement. But if you have them solve some kind of problem that they care about, using the math problem, then they're much more engaged. Meaning, so if you're working on a letter for your English class and that letter goes to your teacher, it's maybe one thing. But if you're writing it about a civic issue that you care about and you're sending that letter to the mayor, all of a sudden there's a lot more meaning in it, and so you're internally motivated by it. And then competency. So if you're doing something that you find kind of boring, then you'll be less motivated by it. If you do something that's really hard, then you'll be overwhelmed by something, and then you won't be motivated. But if you do something that really speaks to your competency and that's just hard enough, then you end up in what's called the zone of proximal development. You're kind of in a state of flow, right? You're fully engaged, and therefore your motivation is going to be pretty high. So games act as a powerful internalizer of motivation. If you kind of pull yourself away and really look at what's happening in there, which is what we're going to do now, they're really effective at doing this. And that's why kids and I mean really culture now is shifting a lot towards game. We play them on our phones. We used to have consoles, or we still do, but games were predominantly on consoles, and then have kind of permeated a lot of different aspects of our life. And so especially now, I think one of the reasons we've been seeing some success with Classcraft is just because it's really culturally relevant to this generation. Whereas, for us, maybe TV and movies were a little bit more important when we were younger. And so there are some games in education that exist right now. This is sort of what the current ecosystem looks like. So we have some complex simulations. So in the top left here, this is a game called Spores that would show you how evolution works. We have assessment games. We have role-playing games in the classroom. We have quizzes. So this is kind of what's available at the moment. And then there's some of the criticism against those games. And so, some of them say it teaches behaviorism. So it's really kind of shaping students to behave in a certain way. So if we think of there's this example of Pavlov's dog, which was an experiment where they rang a bell every time a dog, they wanted to feed a dog. And so the dog would just come every time you'd hear this bell. And over time you'd get trained. And then they would ring the bell and there would be no food. And the dog would still start salivating and he was sort of trained to do that. So bad games sort of create behaviorism. Often they'll be really just simple point systems. So you'll get a point for doing something good or a point for doing something bad, but it's not really like a game. It's just sort of a game mechanic that's attached to an activity that already existed. You can end up with things like the emergence of false conclusions. So, if we go back one slide, we had, this game Spores here up the top left, and this game you would start with as a single-celled organism, and then you eat other creatures, and then you grow, and eventually you grow legs and all this kind of stuff. And it's supposed to teach evolution, but in the end, it ended up teaching creationism, because the game itself implies that there's an intelligent force that's guiding all this, which is you, the player. And so the game actually had the complete opposite impact of what the creators were trying to make. Often in education, games are boring. They're not very well designed, and they can foster a lot of competition, which sometimes is outweighs basically the benefits of the game. So we've seen a lot of games in education, people trying to do this, and it's been more or less successful. And so what we want to do now is sort of look at what's the difference between good design and bad design, right? On the right, it's kind of hard to use a urinal when you're standing right next to a urinal. So within relation to games can fundamentally transform the school experience when they're designed well. So it can really just sort of change what it's like for a student to come to school every day and really make them excited. And so we're going to go through a couple different things right now, kind of like the building blocks of what makes a good game. And this is why good games are effective. So this game is called Skyrim. It was a massively successful game. And it really was one of the first games that was an open world, right? So you could go in and do anything. And so really the power behind Skyrim is that you had autonomy. So you had full creative control, freedom to go create your own adventures and interact. And within that universe, there was, a story and all kinds of stuff you could do, but there was also all kinds of side things that you could do. And so autonomy is really a powerful tool within game design. We're going to see it next year. Within the technology world, there's a lot of excitement about virtual reality, Oculus Rift, all this kind of stuff. It's going to be coming out next year in a pretty strong way. VR is a huge autonomy is a huge component in VR, I should say. And so so autonomy is a pretty powerful ingredient when creating an experience that fosters engagement. Another one is competency. So this is Flappy Bird. Flappy Bird was a game where you would tap and this bird would go up and down and you'd try to get through these pipes as far as you could. Super, super simple game. But super addictive. People would keep wanting to see how they could beat their high score. There's no end to the game. There's no, you never beat it. You just beat your own score and you're really playing against yourself, right? So another really famous competency game is Tetris. Tetris just gets faster and faster and there's no end, and people have spent hours and hours and hours and hours playing Tetris. And so what emotion sort of this elicits is, the further you beat your score and all that kind of stuff, you're developing self-worth, which gives you kind of a hit of dopamine. There's a satisfaction with that kind of stuff that really starts becoming something that you internalize. And when you fail, then it develops some anger, but anger like in enough of a proportion that you just want to come back to the game, not necessarily that you want to put it away. And I think that, like, you know, when we're designing sort of these experiences, ultimately the background or the context that it's in is it's an emotional thing. Really, we're trying to create experiences that affect us emotionally, and that's you know, kind of create internal motivation. And so, you know, anger on its own might seem like a bad thing, but like just enough anger, it makes you actually want to come back and try it harder. And so creating experiences that sort of foster just the right amount of certain kinds of emotions is kind of important. So another big component is social relationships. So this is World of Warcraft. I'm sure most of you have heard of this. You really have to work with other players in Warcraft to be able to accomplish certain things. And so, you know, you can go have these big boss raids where you need to be 30 people at a time and kind of working together collaboratively to sort of overcome the obstacle. People have developed really strong friendships in Warcraft. You can, you know, kind of be also, you know, you can have negative relationships with other players that would make you come back and actually engage more as well. And so the social component in Warcraft was a really powerful driving thing. And that really went, you know, deep. So it developed strong senses of belonging where, you know, there's a bunch of people doing cosplay, they're dressing up as the characters, they're feeling like, wow, you know, my guild is really my family. This is where I feel understood. And it can go as far as even falling in love. Some people that have met in World of Warcraft and actually gotten married as a result. We've had Warcraft-themed weddings. Like, it goes pretty deep. And so the sort of social component is a really strong one. And I think that, you know, from, again, my background is more as a designer and experiential designer. And so Classcraft really came out of my brother's classroom, who teaches grade 11 physics. And so his side was really the education side of it. And so his lens is a lot more kind of through the classroom, and mine's a lot more through design sort of side. And so I think that when we start talking about social relationships and designing experiences and emotion and all that kind of stuff, social relationships is kind of the most powerful way to create emotional responses to experiences, because you're dealing with another human. And so that means that there's more of a range of emotions you can have with another human, because they might react favorably or unfavorably to something you do and all that kind of stuff. And so it's very compelling if you can create strong social experiences. And Warcraft is a really good example of that. This is Super Metroid. This is an older game. Super Metroid was a game about discovery. So you're this explorer and you're going on this alien world, and you would have to go through all these different mazes and stuff, and you'd find something that would unlock something at the other side of the maze. That whole game was based off of discovery. And so that elicits, you know, very primal kind of responses around curiosity, wonder. What happens now? Oh, this is cool. This weapon does this thing. And so that's another really important piece. The element of surprise is an amazing thing in creating experiences. So this is Grand Theft Auto. This was a very, you know, big game the last couple of years. It's a huge world, a little bit like Skyrim. So there's autonomy, you can run around and all this kind of stuff. But one of the things that they did really well in Grand Theft Auto is that they put in what are called Easter eggs. So like surprises that you wouldn't expect at different times. So in the game, you steal cars, you kind of have this sort of gangster life. It's a little bit controversial for that. But sometimes in Grand Theft Auto, you would steal a car and then the screen would go black. And then it would fade back in and you would be naked, tied up on railroad tracks as a train's coming towards you. And then you'd have to like wiggle yourself out and run off the railroad tracks and then try to get back into town. And those kinds of things are really fun for the player because it's just completely unexpected. And there's a certain element of delight and danger. And as a result, your senses are a little bit more heightened because you don't know what can happen next. Another really important component to games is feedback. So this is Diablo 3. It is one of the most intense games from a feedback standpoint. So in the center here, we have a character, and he's fighting off all of these, monsters and things. And so you're seeing gold fall, you're seeing points happen, you're seeing monsters fly off and get killed. And so the more feedback that you have, the more engaged you get. And that's, I think from just a cultural perspective, if we think of just this current generation of students with phones and all this kind of stuff, and really just anybody, we're really used to getting a lot of feedback and stimulus now. So we'll get a lot of pings on Facebook or Twitter or whatever, emails coming in, text messages. We're kind of used to being stimulated a lot. And so as a result, experiences that are engaging require a fair amount of feedback in a consistent manner. And these things indicate to us danger, progress. And so we kind of know where we are at all times as we're going through an experience, which is really important in just sort of designing some kind of experience. So feedback is really important. This has evolved, in video games specifically, not just from the experience on the screen, but the physical experience as well. And so if we start from the top left to the bottom right, we start with Pong. We're getting sounds, when it hits the paddle. And then the sounds sort of evolve and the visuals sort of evolve, and you end up with something like Mario, where you're bouncing around and there's music and stuff. And then we get to the point where the Nintendo 64 came out with a rumble pack. And so your remote would shake when something would happen on the screen. So now you're having like this physical kind of experience with the interactions. And then Nintendo's particularly good at this. They evolved that to the Wii. So now you had a remote and how you moved your hand and, did different things. It would buzz or it would interact on the screen. That then evolved. Microsoft came out with the Kinect. And so that's a body sensor that sees how your body is shaped and moving, and then will interact on the screen. And so, the more and more this goes, the more physical it gets. And then now we're really on the cusp of VR sort of becoming this thing. And so in that sense, which way you turn your head gives you feedback. They've developed speakers in those VR headsets to be 3D sound. So if you hear a sound on your right and you turn, it'll kind of sound like it's behind you or in front of you, depending on where your body is positioned in relationship to that virtual space. They also have some controllers that are quite sensitive in terms of where they are in space and which angles and what have you. And so that's also been a way to really kind of create more engagement is this feedback component. And it's been happening both in game and then within the actual physical experience related to the human body. The last ingredient that I really want to talk about is storytelling. So storytelling is as old as it gets in terms of creating experiences and being able to share them. They're really powerful because you can have pretty much the entire spectrum of emotions related to a story. This is a story. This game, I should say, is a game called The Walking Dead on iPad. So it's a TV show that they turned into a game. The game was a huge hit. It's kind of like a choose your own adventure, like a really good interactive choose your own adventure. It's a very dark kind of universe. There's zombies and all kinds of stuff. But it really forces you at times to make some decisions that are surprising. So you'll get to know two characters, and then there'll be some kind of event or emergency, and then you'll have to choose between one or the other dying. And then you're put on the spot. You have 5 seconds, and you just sort of choose one. And it's pretty. It allows us ourselves to be confronted with certain choices that we wouldn't necessarily make in real life, but kind of live vicariously through the experience. And so we see that in movies. Like movies, in essence, we're consuming emotions, right? Like, oh, I like action films. I'm consuming adrenaline. Right. And so, or I like romance films. I'm consuming an emotion of love and longing and all these kinds of things. And so games kind of put us in the driver's seat of that and have the potential of really upping that even more so. And so storytelling is a really important component to certain types of games. Like, if we come back to Tetris, you can make a game that only works with one of these things, right? So actually, I'm getting ahead of myself. So basically, those are all the different pieces. If we look at some of these needs that are fulfilled by game, we have autonomy, competency, relationship. So Skyrim, Tetris or Flappy Bird, or relationships like World of Warcraft. And then those sort of feed actually directly into what motivates us in education. So autonomy and controllability are basically the same thing. Competency is competency, and relationships really drive meaning in an important way. And there's like a lot of academic papers and all that kind of stuff that really demonstrate this within games and within education. And so anyways, for us, my brother studied games in education while he was a teacher, and sort of, that informed a lot of how Classcraft was created. And so if we look at the full list of things that we talked about that makes a good game, we have autonomy, competency, discovery, storytelling, feedback, surprise, social relationships. So, you can make a game with one of these really working really well, or you can try to make a game with all 7 of these working really well. It really just depends on kind of what the game is, but the idea is that these are kind of the levers, if you will, to create engagement in an experience. And so oh, my slideshow froze. Sorry, guys. See if we can get out of this. Oh, okay. There you go. So that kind of takes us to Classcraft. So, we've tried to use all of these ingredients in Classcraft. So Classcraft is a free game-based operating system that transforms any classroom into an immersive role-playing game. It's designed to increase student motivation, foster collaboration between students, and to make classroom management for teachers really easy. Maybe just a little bit of background on the project itself. I've been working with my brother for 10 years. I'm a creative director in New York, and he's a teacher up in Canada. And he and I both really had challenging experiences in school. So you might not be able to tell by this, presentation, but I'm like 6 feet 5 inches. Like I'm a really tall, kind of big human. But I got picked up on a lot in school. And then my brother was really smart, and he was really bored in school. Just like knew most of the answers and where he was going, and just felt like it was a bit of a waste of time. And so that led him into teaching, led me into the arts. And he got a degree in physics and then a degree in education, and then started teaching. So I would get gigs in New York, and I would hire him to do the programming for these websites that I would get. And I would design and work with the clients and stuff. And so he was working 30 hours a week up in Canada. He really loves teaching, and then would supplement his income by doing some programming. And because of that, he could code. And so he started. Oh, my slideshow is a mind of its own. Sorry, guys. I think my computer is just struggling a little bit. So just keep going with my story, but you're getting a preview of what's to come, unintentionally. And so basically, he started. Here, I'm going to try to restart this really quickly. He started making games in his classroom, and those games kind of took a lot of different forms, and eventually he realized that really what would be fun would be to make a role-playing game. And so he decides, we'll give points for becoming a better student, and we'll get powers when you level up, and those powers will be real. So he makes this game, and after a few years, he's got an intern who's like, hey, it'd be really cool to do this in my classroom. Do you mind? He's like, no, not at all. And over the course of a weekend, it's like, hey, maybe I should make a website and just put the rules of what I did online. And in a day, 130,000 people came to that website. And it went viral on Reddit. Some reporters started reaching out, and he calls me up and he's like, I don't know what's happening right now, but something is happening. And would be, maybe we should do something with this. And so that was, 2.5 years ago. At a certain point, we brought our dad in to help with the business side of things, and we started making Classcraft. And so specifically, my power or my keynote crashed, so I'm just going to give you guys a live demo. You guys can see my screen, okay? Great. So Classcraft. In Classcraft, every student has a character. And the reason that a student wants to play is that they get these powers. The powers are real. What that means is that the hunting power lets you eat in class. Ambush will let you hand in an assignment a day late, or counterattack will let you ask a question on an exam. So real things. We're not talking about, hypothetical badges or any of this kind of stuff. There's a real direct impact on a student's life when playing. I need to preface everything that I'm going to show you with all of this can be customized. So, if you don't allow eating in your classroom, or you can't ask a question in an exam because that would get you as a teacher in trouble, you go in here and you put something else in. You figure out what gets your student motivated. You can even figure out what the power should be with your students, which is a really fun way to sort of roll it out. So just keep that in mind as we look at this stuff. So you're here and you're getting real powers by playing this game. The way that you get those powers is by getting experience points, so XP. So we use in Classcraft all the different points that you would typically find in video games. So most students will kind of understand this, and culturally, they're used to these terms. So experience points are points that you get to gain experience. If you get enough of them, you level up, you go to the next level, and when you level up, you get more powers, right? You get a power or a point to get a power every time. So the way that you get experience points is you can put in, as a teacher, any behavior that you want to encourage in your classroom. So if you were, teaching Spanish, you could write, speaking Spanish, and you could give 100 points for that. And now you have a preset, right? So here, speaking Spanish is a thing that you're now giving points and incentivizing. So you give the points, this yellow bar fills up, and then as you go, you get more powers. The same is true the other way. So what I mean by that is here on the screen, we have a team. Classcraft is played in teams. It turns basically going to school into a team sport. And so on your team, you may have, if you were, say, Andy, you may have Casey. Casey is very social. She loves to talk with her friends, but she, as a result, shows up late to class. And for that, there's a negative consequence, right? Or a negative consequence in the game. So another value is HP. So this means health points. And if you do something bad in the classroom, and as a result in Classcraft, you lose health points. So she could arrive late to class, and then because she only had 1 HP, she could basically die in the game. We don't call it dying because we don't want kids dying at school, so we call it falling in battle. But the idea is that if you were to die in Classcraft, you would get a negative consequence. So luckily for her, Classcraft really fosters collaboration. A lot of the social things that we were talking about in terms of Warcraft and all that kind of stuff, they're really important here. So if, say, Casey is friends with Andy on her team, then Andy has a power called the Protect power, which means he'll take the damage for Casey's negative consequence and get points himself for doing something that's nice to someone else on his team. So he would get points for helping out Casey, right? And Casey's off the hook. She didn't fall in battle. If Casey were to show up and then after that not have her homework done, then she could lose points again. And at which point Andy is like, look, I can't save you every time. Like, you've got to get your homework done. And so she would fall in battle, and as a result would get a negative consequence. In Classcraft, the teacher will set up a list of negative consequences. When a student falls in battle, it picks one at random. So this is where the element of surprise comes in and becomes really engaging. So typically we recommend having one really bad one and then one where you get off the hook. So nothing happens, which is really exciting when that happens. You feel like you won the lottery. And then the negative one, the really bad one, would be like, for my brother in his classes, he would have Saturday morning detention. And everybody was so scared of coming to school on the weekend that it really motivated them to really try to make sure nobody fell in battle. He played for 3 years and it happened once. So it wasn't a really big deal, but the benefit that he got out of his classroom was huge in terms of motivation. So for him, he felt like that was a really good thing. It could be anything. It could be baking, cookies for everybody in class. It could be having to get up at the front of the class and sing a song or whatever it is, but something that they don't want to do. And then the other component of falling in battle is that when someone does, they get a negative consequence for themselves, but it also hurts everyone else on the team. And this is really important. So what happens is that as a result, everybody's lost a little bit of life. And now that whole team is invested in each other's outcome, behavior. And from a teacher, this is pretty important because really what we're doing is we're introducing a third actor into the classroom. We have the teacher, we have the students, and now we have this game. And the game basically is neutral. You can't get upset at it. You chose to play it. You know, like you're there and you're interacting. And so what the game is doing is encouraging and incentivizing students to be better students. And so as a result, when you have classroom discipline issues, you would end up maybe policing your kids all the time. Now the game is sort of encouraging them to police each other. So they'd say, Ruth, like, you know, be quiet. You're going to get us in trouble. And as a result, you've now saved, you know, whatever, 30 seconds telling Ruth to just sort of be a little bit more attentive, and you can continue on with your lesson. So this is pretty powerful. You know, Classgraph has been out now for about maybe 15 months. We've heard endless stories of just different ways that this has been helpful. Oops. So we end up with stories like, we'll interview a student. I was in Texas last year, and I was interviewing a student, and he was like, yeah, you know, I'm not really into this class, and I don't really, you know, like coming to school that much. But then we like started playing Classcraft, and at first I wasn't really into it, and then I realized it was actually like really fun, you know. And I play a lot of PlayStation, and like I had got this, like, and it was good, you know, like it was good because it was fun to come to school. It was also kind of good for my grades because, you know, my grades were low. I was like, whoa, okay. He's like, and then it made it like kind of cool to ask for help because, like, you know, John, who's in my class, like he's really smart, and every time he would help me out, he got more points. And so he wanted to help me out because, you know, he was getting more powers, and that was kind of helping all of us. And as a result of him helping me out, like my grades got better. And after the fact, I went and talked to his teacher, and that student was like at a 61, 62, and in 6 weeks got up to honor roll. And he's like, it's actually having all these impacts on his motivation and his sense of self-worth and all this other stuff. And so so there's something really kind of powerful in terms of the team dynamics. We've had countless stories as well of students who, you know, have, my characters are going to start dying now, issues with bullying. And so they'll go in and they'll put the kid that's getting picked on and the bully in the same team. And at first it's kind of rough. It's not totally pleasant. But as the game develops over the course of the school year, the bully realizes that he's codependent on this person that he's giving a hard time to. And that it's actually better to treat that person well so that they're going to want to protect them or heal them or all that kind of stuff later on in the course of the year. And so so it's interesting because you end up with teachers who are, say, teaching math, and they're like, wow, I really never had a chance to talk about anger in my classroom. But, you know, these two students kind of got into it a little bit. And then because it was in my class, I could actually talk about anger after class with them and kind of work out this knot that had been in their relationship there. And kind of gave me this new point of entry into being able to talk about certain things. So so this is kind of the basic platform. And then I know I'm kind of hitting you guys with like a ton of information, and I feel like I almost should ask for questions now, but I'll go a little longer and then we can kind of get into more questions. So it's a little hard to troubleshoot question one without seeing it, but I think that in terms of uploading your list of students and stuff, there's a template there, an Excel template, that if the information kind of needs to be formatted that way for it to work. And then the idea is to grab, once you've completed that Excel template, like copy those cells and then paste it into the sort of box underneath in the import page. So it should like kind of be able to, so right now, just so that you know, we're actively working on streamlining the onboarding process. So how you get started with Classgraph. So you guys are kind of looking at the old version, which is unfortunate because we've learned a lot of things from seeing a lot of teachers create accounts. We're a startup. We're still kind of fixing things as we go. But yeah, you by copying it in there, it sort of takes into account the fact that there's different cells, and then we'll kind of organize it there. And then it should bring in your students. Typically what we suggest doing is waiting to create your actual class and leaving your demo class there so you can kind of see what's happening within the game and kind of understand it a bit better, and then presenting the game to your students. So saying, hey, here's this game we're going to play. Making your teams already, so you have a sense of what the team should be, and then each student has to figure out if they want to be a mage, a warrior, or a healer. And there's like a handout in the help section where you can kind of get a bunch of the different powers and everything outlined. And then once they make that choice, you would then create your classroom. So you'd then create the characters, put in their gender. We have different looks to take into account ethnicity, and then which kind of character they want to be, and also their first power, which is an important thing to figure out. Something more to maybe add to that. So there's really nuances between mages, warriors, and healers. So each character has like more health points versus AP points. So AP points, we didn't really get into it, but they're action points, and they're actually what you spend every time you use a power. So that, say, a student can't just use powers at will, and they regenerate a little bit every night. And so so each character has different AP and HP points. Typically, the warriors have the most health, HP, and the mages have the least. But the mages' powers are the best powers for the group, and the warriors' powers are more suited to protecting and that kind of stuff. And so generally, we find that there's a better fit if stronger students take mages, and students that have a little bit of a harder time with subject matter take warriors. And then the other question, what was the second question again? Sorry, I forget. Yeah, so the idea is that thank you for clarifying. If you just create your account and you go into like exploring the interface, there's like tutorials that explain kind of what the different sections do. And that demo account basically allow you just to play around with the interface. The second you start creating your student or your first class, if you don't have any students in the account, then you can't actually see the interface. So you're better off sort of staying with the demo class to just sort of show to your students. And then once you've kind of explained it to them and they're into it, then you would come back and create the actual characters and everything. And then for class 2, you would actually start playing with them. Does that make sense? Sorry, Tom, if you could just repeat the second question. I had an answer, but I forget what it was. Oh, yeah, great. So yes, you don't need an email account. You can create a username or password. So when you create a student, it'll tell you what kind of account you want to create, and you can just say email or username or password, and then you can create usernames that kind of fit with maybe your name or your initials, and then the student's name, and then like maybe 1, 2, 3, 4, and then have them go in and change their passwords afterwards. So that's how most teachers that have younger students go about doing it. Yeah. Are there any other questions at this point? I mean, I think it might be interesting to just walk you through maybe more of the platform as you guys are maybe poking around or discovering it. Got it. Yeah, I got it. So I think at first glance, like we're cognizant that what we're doing is basically kind of a new way of teaching, right? We're not asking you to change what you're teaching, but it's a different way of presenting and running your classroom. Some teachers will see, oh, putting in these points, that's kind of some work. We have an iOS app, Android app. You can walk around the classroom. It's pretty straightforward to do it on your phone. We also have some teachers that will deputize a student and say you're the game master assistant for this class, and then they'll be the one at the laptop putting in points. And if they do a good job at the end, then the teacher will give them 100 points for being the game master or something for the day. And therefore, you can teach and just say, hey, Katie got the answer right for this. Can you give her points? And then go back to just teaching. Or so-and-so just showed up late. Can you make sure that happens? What we've seen and gotten a lot of feedback from teachers about is, yes, this probably takes, I want to say 5 minutes, maybe 10 minutes a class. But in terms of the amount of time it saves in discipline or getting people focused or excited, it actually saves more like 10 to 15. And so there's actually a gain in terms of time in the classroom. That being said, I think every class is different and every teacher is different and all that kind of stuff. So it's definitely something to experiment with. But for the most part, you're really using it to sort of augment what you're already doing. So it's not really more time. It's just doing what you're already doing, but a little bit differently in sort of this game-based way. Right. Right now, it's manually enter them. That's what we're working on at the moment. So I think regardless, you need to put in your student's name and last name and email. Like there needs to be some kind of check that the teacher is doing it themselves. So some of the stuff that we're going to have in the next month or month and a half is Google Classroom integration, right? So you can hit a button and it'll load in your class rosters. And as we go, we're going to start integrating with more systems and making that process a bit smoother. Right now, it is basically an Excel import. That's the fastest way to do it. We have one of the things that we're really kind of surprised by is that when teachers start playing Classcraft, there's kind of a back end for teachers, and there are forums where the teachers can interact with each other. Last year, we had over 100,000 posts, teachers just meeting each other in different places in the world and sharing ideas about how they use Classcraft. Some of them made Google forms so that they would send the Google form to the student. The student would log in, put in their name, their username, like all that kind of stuff. And then the Google Forms would compile it into an Excel doc that they could then import pretty easily. So that's sort of been the workaround that teachers have found right now, is sort of using Google Forms. But yeah, for now, that's unfortunately where we're at, and we're very clear that it's a pain point in the process, and we're working on it at the moment to fix it. So once you have this sort of framework of students, teams, points, you kind of have the foundation to a house. And on top of that, you can do all kinds of really fun things. So can you guys see my screen again? Okay, cool. So one of those things is called a random event, right? So we talked about the element of surprise earlier, and how powerful that is because you don't know what's going to happen. So every class in Classcraft starts with a random event. This is what we recommend. You, as a teacher, want to hit this green button when the bell rings, and whoever's in your class at that moment gets the benefit or the negative consequence of whatever is going to happen here. This is a way to get your students to show up on time to class. And so when you hit this button, we've put 100 in here. You can make your own. It'll be things like today you get twice as many experience points for doing something good. Or all the mages for this class can't get out of their chair. Or the best player in the classroom, the one that has the most points, it loses points. Or things like this, like you got cursed by the crazy cat lady, and now everybody must end their sentence with a meow or lose 5 points, including the teacher. So this is now like a really funny math class, and the students are going to remember that class a lot more because there was this kind of twist to it. We've seen amazing things with this. So we had a teacher last year who made up an event, and it was related to daily pop quizzes that he was giving. And the event was, I basically won't shave my beard if one of you gets 100% on the daily quiz. This lasted 7 months last year, to the point where his principal crossed him in the hall and was like, "What's going on with you? You look like a homeless person. Like your beard is so long. I don't get it." And he's like, "Yeah, but at the same time, come and see my class average." And it was like in the high 90s. He's like, "My kids are eating this up. And so I'm just going to keep running with it." And the principal was really happy. So it's kind of interesting when you start looking at some of these game dynamics and the experience of classroom and all that kind of stuff, where this stuff can be pushed to and what impact culture within your classroom can have on achieving some of the goals that you might have from a more kind of academic perspective. So random events are a really fun thing to play with. Our goal later on in the year is to actually build this into a story mode where there'll be little chapters of a story. It'll be a little bit like a choose your own adventure. So, you met a king in town, and you as a classroom, do you want to go to this banquet that they're throwing in your honor? or not. And then as a result, you hit yes or no, and you get a consequence related to that. So it'd be some fun, like really short ways of doing like a minute or two at the beginning of class and injecting a little bit of storytelling. Another piece we have is a gamified LMS, or for your class content. So you can put in your assignments, videos, whatever you want. We're working on a homework piece that should be out in a week or two, where you'll get points for handing in homework. If you hand in your homework as a team on time, you get more points. So then students start encouraging each other to get their stuff done. You can give points for checking out different resources. And we also have a component in here where it's related to discussion. And so students can actually talk to each other, and you can give points based on that kind of stuff. So I think because I'm streaming and stuff, it's loading. Okay, here it is. So, you could, if someone say were to, if you ask a question and the discussion's happening either in your classroom or at home, you can kind of just come in and give some points to someone for answering a question correctly, right? And then if they say something kind of snarky or not helpful, then you can actually take away points for being rude within the comments. So this is kind of a way to bring your content in here. I don't know if you guys are using an LMS or any other systems. Plans later down the line will be to integrate with them, hopefully before the end of the year. But this is kind of a very stripped down LMS, and it's really easy to like create new posts. It's basically like making an email. So you just put like a subject or title to it, and then you can format things and insert files and different things here. Turn on comments if you want. So yeah, and then you can kind of go get other posts from other classes if you want. Even you have like the library of all the posts you created. So so the LMS is one way to augment and sort of give, if you will, your superpowers to your curriculum. Another aspect that we're really focused on is the experience within the classroom. So you're managing 30 students, you're a teacher. How can that be made to be more compelling? And so at a very basic level, we created things like timers. Hey guys, can you clean up the classroom within 2 minutes? Can you leave us running at the front of class? And then we're running around trying to get it done. And if they do, then you stop the timer and you can give them points. And that by doing just that one action, I actually gave points to the entire class. So it's pretty quick. And then we've done some more complex ones of these. We've got a couple in the works at the moment, and we released one last week, which is boss battles, which is really pretty fun. So you can go and pick a boss, and then you can either have a team fight it, or a student fight it, or a random team or student. And so say if I were to take a team, the Happy Wildebeests, then they would square off against this boss, and the way that they fight is they answer questions. So you set up questions that are related to your curriculum. And so what is the capital of Italy? And then you ask the student what it is, and then they say Rome. And so they got the answer right. And when they do, then that damages the boss. And then over time, they get enough right questions as a team. So there's a different student now, but on that team, and they get the answer right. And so then this boss ends up dying, and then they get gold pieces or experience points, depending on what reward you want to give them. So this is another fun way of just doing formative assessment and kind of creating an exciting experience around it, rather than it being super stressful and all that kind of stuff. The two other big ones that are kind of on our radar for the next little while are we're going to do instant polling. So if you do have a one-to-one class, then students individually will be able to answer questions, and then you'll get stats at the front of the class as to who's answered what, and you can kind of teach to that and then validate it. And then we're doing another one where we're actually using the mic in the laptop to pick up on how loud the class is getting. If the class gets too loud, then they could lose some points. So fun ways to interact with students here. And then the other stuff is kind of just more functional to the classroom. So I'll go through these quickly, but you can put in like grades from any exam that you would give and just translate them into points. So if you wanted to do that, you could do that. You can copy the values in as well from Excel. And give people points based on that. Here we have the Book of Laments. So this is all the negative consequences that have been accumulated within your class, just to keep track of them. We have messaging. So if your students have devices, you can send them messages one-on-one or group announcements or what have you. We also have a parent app, so you can communicate with parents through Classcraft if you want to. Parents can log in at night and actually give some points to students for doing homework. If you want to do that, you can. Really, Classcraft, like at the bare, I just want to iterate this, at the basic level, it's basically this game dashboard as a behavior tool, and that's all you need to use. These are really things that you can do in addition if you want to, but you really don't need to get a good experience out of the platform. And so messaging is in there, and then there's also analytics. And analytics is actually something that's been really powerful for teachers because you're inputting in these behaviors as a result of playing this game in your class. And that information can be helpful when dealing with a parent and being like, okay, here's kind of the average of the class, and here's your student, or here's the average of the class, I should say, and here's your student. And so some days, it's a little less, some days it's a bit more. And here are the kind of behaviors that are coming up on a regular basis, and here's kind of the negative stuff that's happening. And like, as we can see, like there's a bunch of different negative behaviors, but really more than anything else, Casey's arriving late to class. And I think that it's because she's social, and it'd be really great to work at that a little bit. But at the same time, like when she is in class, she's really social, so she tells really good jokes, and she really helps with the atmosphere in the class, and that's been really powerful. And so there's good and bad sides to this, and this is when it's happening. And if you really had to get specific, then there actually is like you can set up a range and actually look at like what happened over time in your classroom, and what was actually kind of going on for that student, and use that as a springboard to have conversations with parents that don't seem subjective, but that are actually rooted in what's happening in the classroom. And for parents, it gives them a better sense of how that's working. Obviously, for every teacher, their relationship with their parents is different teachers choose to do it different ways, and sometimes it can be a bit problematic. So this isn't something into, that's fine as well. But that's kind of the gist of it from the teacher perspective. This last sort of gear here right now shows you the teacher section, and in here we have a help section with a bunch of different stuff, videos, tutorials, all that kind of stuff. Here we have a community forum, so this is where all these different teachers from around the world are engaging. We have community people on our staff that answer questions that are here often. We have we have webinars every week where we'll go through similar things that we looked at today and really show you how to get in the mechanics of things. So if you feel like you need to kind of review some of this stuff, we do live presentations of that kind of stuff. And we have tickets, so you can shoot us emails with the platform if you're ever lost or get stuck or anything weird happens. We are relentless with our tickets, and we generally on a weekday try to get back to you in 3-4 hours, and on the weekend like a day or two most. But yeah, we're really on top of that, and feel like that's a really important thing to be able to do. So so there's a lot of support basically in terms of setting it up. When you're setting up your classes over here, so we talked about the manager, and so you can create your teams here. You can put in your students, add players, add teams. Each team has different crests for their teams and different backgrounds that will show up on the dashboard. So this is kind of a fun thing that students can kind of pick and get clear on. And then you can also customize your settings on an individual class level. So the level cap is how quickly you level up. So if if it's taking too long, you can put this higher or lower, and that would adjust. You can adjust what the actual powers here are by just hitting the pencil here and then changing what it is. Some of these can be edited, some of these cannot be edited. The ones that can't be edited are really part of the game mechanics and are core to sort of how the game works and making sure that there's a codependency between the different warriors, mages, healers. Others are totally editable. So this one, like, teleport initially was you can leave the class for a couple minutes. Some teachers aren't comfortable with that, so they do it. You can trade places with another student within the class, say, and then you can adjust how much it costs and if it's collaborative, if it helps another student on their team or not. And so, yeah, there's a bunch of stuff in here you can edit there. Here's a list of events. There's only one for us because this is our demo account. We typically use this cat lady one as a thing. And then different consequences you can set up. And then your presets for the different behaviors you want to encourage and stuff like that. So those are kind of the core settings that you can kind of adjust back here. The last thing that I just want to go over, and then maybe we'll take a last couple questions, is students can log in, and what that looks like is this. So they're going to see their character, their powers. You know, they might be able to, if they had, like, say, the hunting power, they could just use it without necessarily telling you, right? Hey, I'm gonna use my hunting power, and do it on their laptop or phone, and then you don't need to put any time into doing that. They can also explore their team in the classroom and sort of get a sense of, like, who's on their team and what powers do they have and how they might be able to get some help from their classmates. Another big thing, and really this is kind of the last piece, is that we've talked about health points, action points, which is when you use a power. This costs 5 action points. We talked about experience points, which gets you the powers. And the last currency is gold pieces. And gold pieces are kind of generated automatically in the game. And gold pieces are for equipment. So we went and hired like a ton of video game concept artists. And we've been really active in creating a lot of different looks for the characters. You can mix and match gear, you know, and then buy them basically with gold pieces. And then if you get a full set of gear, you know, you can then it'll like unlock basically little pets that you can train. And so you like put them on a little mission, and you come back a few days later, and if you do 10 of these, then you get this pet that you can actually put with your character. So they're just like fun game things, and the idea is that helps students log back into the interface, and then while they're there, they're still getting updates about assignments, and they can kind of move at their own pace through some of the class content. And then you can also get messages from them and different things. And so so that's kind of what's there. The last thing I'll kind of touch on, which is the gold pieces thing, is Classcraft is free, so you can play and have the majority of the features for free forever, basically. And then we, because we need to actually pay ourselves the salary and be able to work on the project and make sure it's sustainable, there's a premium version. And in trying to figure that out, and having, you know, we're a company that's really rooted in the classroom, that came out of a classroom and understand the realities of a classroom, we try to price it as cheaply as we could. And so the pricing is $8 a month per teacher, and that gives you unlimited classes and students. Because we have some teachers that are teaching at, you know, grade 3, grade 4 level, and have 30 students for the whole year, all day long. And then we have some teachers that are in like South Korea teaching second language English to 900 students a semester. And so for them, they have like, you know, 20 to 2,000 teachers or students, I should say, a year. And so they needed something that kind of worked in both instances. And so we priced it at the price of Netflix, basically. And one of the things that having the premium version will allow you to do is actually be able to reward gold pieces, which is kind of a second way to drive motivation in the classroom, and is pretty powerful. And so the students will be able to customize their character in the free version, but if you have the premium version, it goes faster. And then like some of these features within, you know, the homework component will be kind of in the premium version. The bosses you can do, you know, you can do one. But if you wanted to save a lot of them or have a bunch of different bosses, or, you know, have longer sort of epic boss battles, then you can get the premium version. And the idea is just like we want you guys to use it. We want you to get the benefit of it. And if it's really working for you, then it should be, you know, something that you'll see the value in and want to sort of continue and support. So that's it. That's all I've got for you guys. I know that there's been a ton of information. I hope that you're not overwhelmed. But yeah, I would love to, you know, if there's a minute or two, you got any last questions, I'd be happy to answer anything. Okay, thanks guys. Well, good luck. And you know, if you have any questions or anything, just ping us on the forums or in the tickets, and we're here to help you guys out. All right, take care. Cheers.